We all want to find the most authentic version of ourselves, don't we? We want to get down to the root of who we really are, who we want to be, who we want to present to the world. We want to be able to speak with conviction in a way that really resonates with who we are deep inside, and as a byproduct, relates and resonates with others as well. Well, author Todd Henry is with me today, and he's going to begin laying out a plan for us to find and act on our own true identity. It's a three-part system he calls your voice engine. Today, we're going to hit step one of that process on the One Simple Thing podcast.
It's time to build a better business by building a better you. This is One Simple Thing.
Welcome to the show. Dave Kirby with you, and my guest today is Todd Henry. I'm really honored to have Todd on the program. He is a author of three amazing books, The Accidental Creative, Die Empty, and his new one called Louder Than Words. His books have been translated into more than a dozen languages. His book, Die Empty, was named by Amazon.com as one of the best books of 2013. And now his new one is called Louder Than Words. It's about how to develop an authentic voice that resonates and creates impact. Really glad to have Todd on the show. Todd, welcome to the One Simple Thing podcast.
Thank you, Dave.
Before we get started with the topic today, I just want to talk about you a little bit because, this is your latest book, Louder Than Words, Harness the Power of Your Authentic Voice. But you started off with a pretty popular book called Accidental Creative. What's your journey look like, and what's gotten you from there to here?
You know, it's really kind of been a long, winding, strange trip, as they say, from there to here. But it's funny because you can definitely identify the through line. You know, I talk about that in the book, in Louder Than Words, about identifying your through line. And my through line has been, over the course of many years, working with people who have to go to work every day, who have to make it up, who have to solve problems, who have to design, who have to write, who have to work with their minds and turn invisible things into value. That's really been kind of the through line in my work. And I've worked with a lot of underdogs. I've worked with people who are fighting Goliaths in their industry, trying to create value. And so the Accidental Creative really was targeted at helping people just organize their work, just figure out how do you position yourself so you can deal with the pressure of creating on demand every day. And then Die Empty really kind of took that to the next place and said, okay, you're organized. That's great, but you can be organized and still be doing the wrong things. So how do you make sure that you're doing your best work, the work that you want to point to in 10 years with pride and say, yes, that represents me. And that was really what Die Empty was all about. And this book really kind of, Louder Than Words, kind of takes it to the next place and says, all right, you're organized, you're doing the right work, but is anybody going to care? Is anybody going to listen to you? Is anybody going to pay attention? Because attention for your work is not a birthright. You know, it's earned over the course of time as you resonate with people. And so Louder Than Words really kind of goes then into how do you take those things that you care about, that you're working on, and ensure that you're crafting them and shaping them and developing them according to a consonant voice, one that's reflective of who you are, what you care about, and that will overlap with what the audience cares about, so that you can create impact in the world that you desire to create through your work. So there is kind of a through line there, you know, from the Accidental Creative to Louder Than Words. And that through line, I believe, is working with underdog, create on demand professionals who have to make it up every day. And
that's not just people like you and I that do kind of, entertainment or information products or those sorts of things. That's anybody, really. I mean, we all, whether I'm working at a pizza shop or running my own business, whatever it is, we all are challenged with being creative and solving problems every day.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, most of my work is inside of large organizations, right? I go into these big companies and they bring me in to help people figure out how do I develop practices? How do I very practically implement things that will make me better positioned to deal with the pressures of having to innovate and create? And, you know, I'm talking about large bureaucratic organizations with lots of complexity, lots of systems, and trying to navigate those and at the same time get good work done is really challenging. And so that's really most of what I write about, Dave, has come directly from the mouths or directly from the lives and stories of people who are in those positions, mid-level managers in organizations trying to create change and really kind of facing an uphill battle in doing so.
So I want to get into this book a little bit, Louder Than Words. You talk about developing the power of your authentic voice. And before we get into today's subject here, just let's recap. What is your authentic voice?
So your voice is an expression through a medium to achieve an impact. That's how I define voice. And it's not just what you say, it's how other people hear you that matters.
Yeah, I remember, and I've been in radio for about 35 years. I remember getting started, and somebody taught me a very valuable principle, and it's like, if people misunderstand what you're saying, that's not their fault. It's yours, right? As a communicator.
Absolutely. And I do find people who get really offended by things like that. And it signals a lack of empathy, right?
Yeah.
Because you're there to serve the person. In your case, you're serving the person on the other end of the speakers, on the on the other side of the mic. But in our work, we don't work just to gratify ourselves. Now, work can be very gratifying, but we're creating value to hopefully serve somebody else, to hopefully create some kind of impact, some kind of delta in the world. So we have to keep in mind that delta, and we have to understand that empathy is an important part of connecting with that audience.
Well, let's talk about, yesterday we, on the last episode, talked about the three elements of your voice engine, or this process of developing and harnessing your authentic voice. Number one is identity. Number two is vision. And number three is mastery. And on today's episode, we'd like to tackle that first one, which is vision. And just like any change we want to make in our lives, that really starts internally, right? So it's about who I am as a person and a communicator.
Yeah. So identity really is how you root your work. It's what you're invested in. And as we mentioned on the first episode, we live in a very skeptical age, a very cynical age. I think people are always looking for the angle. So it's important, if you want your work to resonate, that it be rooted in something you care about. Now, somebody who works at an organization, or somebody who is, a team leader, might say, well, how do I do that? How do I, as a person who is just I feel like a cog in a machine, how do I invest myself, who I am, into the work each day? And there are some very practical ways that you can do that. It's important to understand what you stand for. It's important to understand what you care about, the battle lines that you've drawn, the principles that you'll go to the mat for every time, right? And you should be known for those things. What are those things for you? Some people just go with the flow, and they don't want to ruffle any feathers. They don't want to create waves. But the reality is, if you stand for something, if you invest yourself into your work according to what you care about, you're going to ruffle feathers, and you're going to offend people from time to time. And you can do it politically, you can do it kindly, but you're going to offend people from time to time. And that's a part of rooting your work and identity, is understanding that there have to be things that you stand for in your work. And people have to understand what those things are. Over the course of time, that will become evident. But you have to be consistent, and you have to root yourself in what matters. As my friend Tim Schigel, who co-founded Share This, told me, it ended up not making it into the book, but he had this great quote. He said, what we've learned over time is that authenticity doesn't have to amplify. We live in an age where people are screaming through bullhorns trying to get attention and trying to capture page views, or eyeballs or ears or whatever it is. But what Tim said is that when we look at how things spread on the web, things that are invested in with authenticity don't have to amplify. They don't have to be cranked up, because people share them automatically because they see themselves in the voice of the person communicating. And that's what happens when we become invested in our work in a deep way.
Yeah, there's something about authenticity that just kind of resonates with us on a deep kind of human level, right?
It does. And unfortunately, it's one of those words that's so overused now, I think. And that was a real challenge when we were naming given the subtitle to the book, Harness the Power of Your Authentic Voice, because we thought, oh boy, here comes the eye roll, because authenticity is so overused. But I think when we reclaim that phrase and we understand it in its proper context, I think it can be very powerful. Because again, it's not just about transparency, it's about investment. It's about showing that you have skin in the game.
So we're talking today about identity, and you're talking about these values maybe that we hold dear and we don't deviate from them. Would that also be, is it kind of what we've all heard about in terms of core values? Is that what we're deciding here when we're talking about identity?
Yeah, it certainly can be, for sure. That is definitely an element of it. One of the practices that I challenge people to do in the book is to write a manifesto. And the manifesto is essentially an articulation. By the way, this is a private document. This isn't something that you're going to share with the world necessarily. It's a private document. It's something you keep on your own, something that you keep in front of you. And it's essentially a private document with a set of tenets that guide your work. And these are the principles that you stand upon. And it's something that's a living, breathing document that you can go back to on a regular basis. I go back to mine when I'm struggling in my work, or when things get difficult, or when I'm on the the road for a long season and I'm trying to remind myself, why am I doing this? I go back to that manifesto because it helps me remember the core reason why I am willing to suffer on behalf of my work when necessary, which is what that word passion means in its root form, is to suffer. When I'm passionate about something, it means I'm willing to suffer if necessary on behalf of an outcome because I care so deeply about it. So that's kind of what that document does, that manifesto, is it kind of keeps you rooted. It shows, kind of who you are. But another way you can do that, Dave, is very practically to do this exercise I call the 50 notables. And there's nothing magic about this number 50, except that when, a friend of mine several years ago encouraged me to engage in this, that was the number that she gave me. And that number was really hard to hit. And so I thought that's a good goal. That's it's kind of a stretch goal to hit that number. But basically what you want to do is identify 50 places in your life that resonate with you in some deep way. So a couple of questions you can ask to help identify those. Number one, what fills you with compassionate anger? As you look at your work, as you look at the systems in your work, as you look at the people you're serving, as you look at the marketplace, you look at culture, what are the things that move you with compassionate anger that make you think, somebody needs to do something about that? It's a great clue to some of these principles or values that might guide your best work. Another one is what moves you emotionally? What causes you to well up with emotion when you experience it? Again, a great clue. I'm profoundly moved by the stories of underdogs. I mean, I'm talking profoundly moved. So when I watch a movie that has an underdog in it, I am, by the end of the movie, I'm a mess. I mean, I'm just, wiping my eyes. It's crazy, and as a guy, I try to hide it. I'm like, oh, I've got something in my eye, or whatever. But I'm very moved by these stories. And guess what? That finds form in my work. I work with a lot of underdogs and it fuels me. I love it. I love that because I'm profoundly moved emotionally by those stories. Those are just a couple of ways that we can begin to do this. What problems are you obsessed with solving? Other people give up, but you're just obsessed with solving this problem. What is the pattern there? And that's what we're looking for when we look for authenticity. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for tendencies in our life that we can begin to crystallize around and begin to implement in our day-to-day work so that we're, more invested in that work.
Love it. And, I was going to ask you about our one simple thing for today, but I think it has to do, I think you've already kind of given it to us here, right? That's our project for the day.
I think so. I think doing the 50 notables, pay attention to just those three questions. What moves you with compassionate anger? What moves you emotionally? And what problems are you obsessed with solving? Those are three. I give more questions in the book, but those are three that you can begin on right now and look for patterns and look for ways you can begin to infuse some of that into your day-to-day work.
That gets down to the basis, and you talk about identity, but that gets me right down to the basis of who I really am, doesn't it?
I think it has to. Yes, because who you are in many ways is informed by how you respond to your environment.
Todd, thank you very much for being with us. We're going to continue tackling this idea of harnessing the power of our authentic voice. And I'll tell people about where they can pick up a copy of the book here in just a second. But thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Dave.
Todd Henry, an incredibly smart guy and an amazingly effective communicator as well. Would highly recommend you pick up a copy of his books. Of course, his original is The Accidental Creative and Die Empty, both of which I've read and would highly recommend. His new one is called Louder Than Words, Harness the Power of Your Authentic Voice. If you'd like to pick up a copy of that, we have a banner ad on our website. Just go to onesimplething.online.com. Right on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see the banner for Todd Henry. You can click there and pick up your copy of his brand new book. Again, it's called Louder Than Words. Thank you for listening today. Todd Henry going to be back with us again. We'll be exploring step 2 in finding and acting on your own personal voice engine. So hopefully you'll come back and join me then. I'm Dave Kirby, and thank you for listening to the One Simple Thing podcast.